Growing up in the shadow of my brother Jackson was something I'd gotten used to, the golden child who could do no wrong. When our parents passed, I thought things might change between us. Instead, he became even more determined to prove I was the family failure. But what Jackson never knew was that while he was busy climbing corporate ladders and impressing neighbors, I was building something extraordinary in silence. Until the day his private investigator showed up at my door with a confused look on his face. Before I continue this story, drop a like, subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. This story about underestimation might just change how you view success. My parents had a clear favorite, and it was never me. From the earliest days I can remember, Jackson was the golden child in our household. 2 years older, infinitely more charming, and blessed with the kind of natural talent that made everything look effortless. While he collected perfect report cards and sports trophies, I struggled to fit into the narrow definition of success my parents valued. I still remember the summer Jackson graduated high school at 16. He was valedictorian, of course. The whole neighborhood came to our backyard for his graduation party. Mom and Dad beamed with pride, while Jackson delivered a perfect speech about his bright future and their amazing parenting. Meanwhile, I had been sent to my room that morning for getting a C- in algebra. Dad called it not applying yourself, but the truth was I just processed information differently. When Jackson explained math, it was all clean formulas and memorization. In my head, it was colors and patterns and connections that I could never properly translate onto a test paper. That day, watching from my bedroom window, as everyone celebrated Jackson, I promised myself I would find my own path. I just had no idea how long and winding that path would be. College only deepened the divide between us. Jackson attended Cornell on a full academic scholarship where he double majored in finance and economics. I struggled through 2 semesters at the state university before dropping out. The disappointment on my parents' faces when I told them was something I can still see when I close my eyes. Just like Brock to quit when things get challenging, my father said not even bothering to wait until I had left the room. Jackson, home for spring break and watching the whole scene unfold, had tried to play mediator. Maybe college isn't for everyone, Dad. Brock might be more suited for vocational training. Even his defense felt like an insult. But I said nothing, packed my things, and moved to a tiny apartment in Seattle. During days, I worked whatever jobs would hire me without a degree, barista, rideshare driver, warehouse worker. But at night, I taught myself coding. Something about programming languages clicked with me in a way traditional academics never had. The logic, the creativity, the problem-solving, it fit how my brain naturally worked. When Jackson graduated with honors, our parents threw another massive celebration. I came home for it, of course. Stood in the corner nursing a beer while relatives asked Jackson about his new job at a prestigious financial firm and asked me if I was still figuring things out. My answers grew shorter as the night went on, and I noticed my parents barely introduced me to their friends. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom with its faded posters and outdated computer desk, I made another promise to myself. I would succeed on my own terms, even if no one else understood or supported my vision. I never expected that, less than a year later, both my parents would be gone. A rainy night, a truck driver who fell asleep at the wheel, and suddenly Jackson and I were orphans. The funeral was packed. Both our parents had been well respected in the community. Jackson gave the perfect eulogy, articulate even through his grief. When my turn came, I could barely speak. The words caught in my throat, and after a few stammered sentences, I had to step away from the podium. Even at their funeral, you could not pull it together, Jackson said afterward, his voice low and clipped as we stood in the reception line. The pain was still too raw for me to respond. But the division between us grew even deeper when the will was read. The family home, the majority of their assets, all went to Jackson based on their belief in his responsibility and sound judgment. I received only a small sum with a note suggesting Jackson help manage it appropriately for me. That money became a constant source of tension. Every time we spoke, Jackson would find a way to ask if I was being careful with my inheritance. Every career or life choice I made was scrutinized through the lens of what our parents would have wanted. It all came to a head 6 months after the funeral, when Jackson insisted I account for every dollar I had spent. "They wanted me to look out for you," he said during our final big argument. "But you make it impossible when you waste opportunities and resources." "I am not wasting anything," I insisted. "I am building something. You just cannot see it because it does not look like your definition of success." He scoffed. "Building what exactly? You work delivery jobs and live in a studio apartment? Mom and Dad were right to worry about you? You have always been a disappointment, Brock." That was the last meaningful conversation we had for nearly 2 years. I threw myself into my work with renewed determination. During the day, I took a job at a small tech repair shop to pay bills and learn the hardware side of technology. At night, I coded. My breakthrough came when I identified a gap in the market for truly secure communication. With data breaches and privacy concerns mounting, I developed an encryption protocol that was both more secure and more user-friendly than anything available. I called it ShieldTech, though it would be years before that name meant anything to anyone but me. My life changed when I met Thomas at a local tech meetup. 20 years, my senior with 3 successful exits already under his belt, Thomas saw something in my rambling explanation of encryption protocols that others missed. He became my first mentor, helping me refine not just my code, but my business model. "You think differently than most programmers," he told me over coffee one morning. "That is your superpower, not your weakness." With Thomas's guidance, I created a prototype that caught the attention of Amanda Chen, an angel investor known for betting on unconventional founders. She invested $50,000 for a 10% stake in my non-existent company. It was barely enough to keep the lights on, but her belief in me was worth more than the money. "Your brother sounds like a real piece of work," Amanda said once when I mentioned my family background. But sometimes the need to prove someone wrong is the most powerful motivator in business. She was not wrong. With every line of code, with every sleepless night, with every small victory, I imagined showing Jackson that success did not always look like he thought it should. As my small company took its first tentative steps, Jackson's life continued its perfect upward trajectory. He was promoted to vice president at his financial firm before his 30th birthday. The company announcement praised his extraordinary leadership and vision, words that stung even as I tried to ignore them. Then came his wedding to Heather, the daughter of the firm's CEO. I received an invitation, of course. How would it look if the groom's only brother was absent? The ceremony was held at the Four Seasons with 500 guests and coverage in the society pages. I wore the only suit I owned, purchased second-hand, and tailored as best I could afford. During the reception, Jackson introduced me to his colleagues and in-laws with the same patronizing phrase each time. "This is my little brother Brock. He is still finding himself." By the third introduction, I had perfected a tight smile and firm handshake that revealed nothing of my internal rage. Later, when everyone was sufficiently drunk, I overheard Jackson telling one of his groomsmen, "I worry about him, you know. Some people just never find their path." I left before they cut the cake. After the wedding, Jackson and Heather moved into a McMansion in the suburbs and began hosting regular family dinners. I attended the first few out of some misplaced sense of obligation. Each one followed the same pattern: polite small talk, followed by increasingly invasive questions about my career progress and 5-year plan. Jackson would sit at the head of his massive dining table, swirling expensive scotch, and nodding sympathetically at my vague answers, while Heather exchanged knowing glances with him. What neither of them knew was that during those dinners, I was in the middle of securing my first major client. A mid-sized financial services company had agreed to implement my security protocol, bringing in enough revenue to hire 2 developers and move operations from my apartment to a small office space. The breaking point came at Thanksgiving. Jackson and Heather hosted an extended family gathering at their home, complete with professional catering and decoration that looked straight out of a magazine. During dinner, Jackson stood to give a toast about family success and carrying on our parents' legacy of excellence. He spoke at length about our cousin's medical school graduation, our aunt's promotion, and Heather's charity work. He mentioned everyone at the table except me. Later, as I helped clear dishes, I overheard him in the living room with our cousins. "I worry about Brock's future," he said in that same concerned tone I had grown to hate. "He just cannot seem to get his act together. I am thinking I may need to intervene more directly." I set down the plates I was carrying, walked straight out the front door, and decided in that moment to completely separate myself from Jackson's toxic influence. I blocked his number, stopped attending family functions, and poured all my energy into my company. And that is when things began to change. A major tech publication featured ShieldTech as one to watch in the cybersecurity space. Our user base hit 1 million within 3 months of that article. Suddenly, venture capitalists were calling, and we secured Series A funding with a $10 million valuation. I made a deliberate choice to keep my success private. In public appearances and press, I used a pseudonym and kept my personal details vague. I moved to a modest but comfortable house in a different neighborhood, upgrading my lifestyle in small ways that would not attract attention. I bought a new car but not a flashy one. I replaced my secondhand suits with tailored ones, but nothing ostentatious. Still, these changes did not go completely unnoticed. On the rare occasions, I could not avoid crossing paths with Jackson, a cousin's wedding, a distant relative's funeral. I could see him watching me with increasing suspicion. I no longer appeared desperate for his approval or assistance. I declined his offers of financial help with a casual, "I am doing fine, thanks." The power dynamic was shifting, and he could sense it. "You seem different lately," he remarked after our grandmother's birthday party, where I had arrived in a new BMW. "More confident. I hope that means things are turning around for you." "I am doing well," I said simply, "but I appreciate your concern." His eyes narrowed slightly. "What exactly are you doing these days?" "You are still pretty vague whenever anyone asks." I smiled. "Just technology consulting. Nothing that would interest you." That brief exchange must have bothered him more than I realized at the time. Because 3 weeks later, a man named Neil Dawson showed up at my office with a business card and a strange request. I was reviewing code with my lead developer when my assistant interrupted to say someone was insisting on seeing me. "He will not state his business," she said, "but he is very persistent." Neil Dawson did not look like trouble when he walked into my office. Mid-50s, graying at the temples with the relaxed posture of someone comfortable in his own skin. He handed me his card, Dawson Investigations, and I felt my stomach drop. "How can I help you, Mr. Dawson?" I asked, keeping my expression neutral. "I would prefer to discuss this privately," he said, glancing at my developer who took the hint and left. When we were alone, Neil sat down across from me and placed a manila folder on my desk. "I have been hired to investigate you, Mr. Sanders." I leaned back in my chair, mind racing through possibilities. Competitors looking for trade secrets. An investor doing extra due diligence. By whom your brother Jackson Sanders. The statement hung in the air between us. Of all the scenarios I had imagined, this had not been one of them. My brother hired a private investigator to look into me. I finally managed. For what purpose? Neil shifted uncomfortably. He expressed concern that you might be involved in something illegal. He mentioned your sudden lifestyle improvements without any visible means of support. He asked me to find evidence of whatever you might be hiding. I started laughing. I could not help it. The absurdity of the situation, Jackson so desperate to confirm I was a failure that he hired someone to prove it, struck me as both hilarious and deeply sad. "And what have you found, mister?" Dawson, I asked when I could speak again. Neil's professional demeanor cracked slightly as he opened the folder. "That is why I wanted to meet with you directly. What I found was unexpected. You are Thomas Shields." Thomas Shields was the pseudonym I used in business dealings, borrowed from my mentor's first name. I neither confirmed nor denied it. ShieldTech Neil continued, currently valued at $50 million with pending acquisition offers from 3 major tech companies. Founder and majority shareholder Thomas Shields, who maintains privacy through various legal structures. But the trail eventually leads back to you. I remained silent, studying the man across from me. He did not seem judgmental or threatening. If anything, he appeared genuinely curious. "I have been doing this job for 25 years, Neil said. "Most cases are straightforward, cheating spouses, insurance fraud background checks. But occasionally I find something truly surprising. Like a supposed underachiever, secretly running one of the fastest-growing security companies in the country." "What do you intend to tell my brother?" I asked. "The truth," Neil replied simply. "That is what he is paying me for." I considered offering him more money to keep quiet, but something in his straightforward manner suggested that would be both ineffective and insulting. "He will not believe you," I said instead. "Jackson has spent his entire life seeing me as a failure. That narrative is too important to his self-image." Neil shrugged. "That is not my problem. I was hired to find facts, not manage your family dynamics." After Neil left, I sat in my office until late, staring at the Seattle skyline and wondering how Jackson would react. Part of me wanted to call him first to control the narrative, but a larger part wanted to let this play out, to finally have my brother see me clearly without any filters or explanations. I did not have to wait long. 2 days later, Jackson showed up at my house unannounced. It was Sunday evening, and I was in my backyard grilling when I heard the doorbell followed by insistent knocking. Jackson stood on my porch, looking like he had just run a marathon. His normally perfect hair was disheveled, his eyes wild. "Is it true?" he demanded, without preamble. "Are you Thomas Shields? Did you create ShieldTech?" I gestured for him to come inside, maintaining a calm I did not entirely feel. "Would you like something to drink?" "I was just making dinner." "I do not want a drink," he almost shouted. "I want you to explain how you have been lying to the family for years." "Lying?" I raised an eyebrow. "I never lied. I just stopped sharing details of my life with people who showed no interest in understanding me." Jackson paced my living room, taking in the modest but well-appointed space with new eyes. $50 million. That is what Dawson told me. That your company is worth $50 million. Current valuation is closer to $75 million after the Series B round closed last month, I said quietly. "But who is counting?" That stopped him cold. He sank onto my couch, looking suddenly deflated. "Why would you keep this secret? We are family." I had a right to know, and there it was, the entitlement that had characterized our relationship since childhood. Jackson's belief that my accomplishments belonged to him somehow, that my life was an open book he had the right to read and critique. "You had no right to anything I said," my voice steady, "just like you had no right to hire someone to investigate me." "I was worried about you," he insisted, but the excuse sounded hollow even to him. "You suddenly had money, a new car, but would not talk about your work. What was I supposed to think? You could have trusted me," I suggested. "You could have accepted that I might succeed in ways you did not anticipate or control." Jackson's face flushed. "You have always been so secretive, so different. Even as kids, I never understood why you could not just do things the normal way." "The normal way," I repeated. "You mean your way, Dad's way." "It worked for me," he shot back. "I have a great career, a beautiful house, a perfect wife. And yet here you are breaking into a cold sweat because your little brother might have achieved something without your guidance or approval. We stared at each other across my living room, years of unspoken resentment hanging between us. Then Jackson did something that genuinely shocked me. His shoulders slumped, and he covered his face with his hands. "I have always been jealous of you," he said so quietly. "I almost missed it. Your freedom, your creativity, your ability to see things differently." I stood frozen, unable to process this confession. Jackson had never admitted vulnerability to me, not once in our entire lives. "You were always Dad's favorite," I said reflexively. He looked up with a bitter laugh. "Because I killed myself trying to be exactly what he wanted. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect life. Do you know how exhausting that is? How empty it feels sometimes?" For the first time, I saw my golden brother clearly, not as the confident success story, but as someone trapped by expectations and approval-seeking behaviors that mirrored my own, just expressed differently. Meanwhile, he continued, "You just went your own way. Even when everyone thought you were crazy or failing, you stuck to your vision." I never had that kind of courage. The anger I had nursed for years began to dissolve, replaced by something more complicated. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. "So," Jackson said, visibly pulling himself together, "I was thinking I could help you with the business side of things. My financial expertise would complement your technical knowledge. I could talk to Heather's father about investment opportunities, maybe join as an advisor or partner." And just like that, the moment of genuine connection evaporated. Jackson had briefly shown me his true self, only to immediately revert to his controlling, entitled behavior. He was not seeing me as an equal, but as a new opportunity to exert influence and claim credit. "No," I said, firmly interrupting his planning. "That is not happening, Jackson." He blinked in surprise. "But I could help you grow even bigger. My connections alone would." "I do not need your connections. I do not need your help. And I definitely do not need a partner or advisor who has never believed in me until I proved financially valuable." His face hardened again. "So that is it. You strike it rich, and suddenly you are too good for family." After everything I have tried to do for you, I took a deep breath, knowing this moment would define our relationship going forward. "This is not about the money, Jackson. This is about respect. You have never respected me, my choices, or my abilities. You hired a private investigator rather than simply asking me what I was doing with my life. That says everything about how you see me." "So what now?" he asked, his voice tight. "Now I continue building my company, living my life, and you go back to yours. If you want to have a relationship with me going forward, it needs to be as equals. No more condescension, no more control, no more looking out for me like I am incapable of managing my own life." Jackson stood, straightening his jacket with a practiced motion. "You will call when you need me. You always do." "Not this time," I said, walking him to the door. "Maybe not ever again, unless something changes between us." As I watched him drive away, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. For the first time in my life, I had set a clear boundary with my brother. Whether our relationship survived, that boundary remained to be seen. The weeks following Jackson's confrontation were strangely quiet. I expected angry calls, family members recruited to pressure me, or even legal threats. Jackson had always been one to escalate conflicts. Instead, silence. Complete radio silence that was more unnerving than any argument would have been. Meanwhile, news of my success began spreading through the family and my old social circles. I received calls from cousins I had not spoken to in years, former classmates who suddenly remembered our close friendship, and even my high school guidance counselor who wanted to reconnect. I handled each call the same way, polite but distant. I had spent too long building my life and company to suddenly throw open the doors to people who had never shown interest in me before. The business continued to thrive. A major tech company made an acquisition offer that would value ShieldTech at over $100 million. I turned it down after lengthy discussions with my team and board. We had more to build, more to accomplish before considering an exit. 3 months after our confrontation, I heard through family that Jackson had experienced a serious career setback. The details were vague, something about a merger falling through that he had championed, but the result was clear. For the first time in his professional life, Jackson had failed publicly. I wrestled with whether to reach out. Part of me, the part still nursing childhood wounds, felt a dark satisfaction in his stumble, but a larger part recognized the opportunity this presented. Perhaps now, with his perfect image cracked, Jackson might be more receptive to a genuine relationship. I sent a simple text, "Heard about work. If you want to talk, I am around." His response came 2 days later. "Coffee tomorrow. The place near your office." We met at a small cafe on a rainy Tuesday morning. Jackson looked different, slightly rumpled with dark circles under his eyes that his expensive suit could not disguise. "Thanks for reaching out," he said, after we had ordered. "Not many people have. Fair weather friends," I observed. The downside of building relationships based on success and status. He flinched, but nodded. "Heather's father has been particularly cold. Turns out having the CEO as your father-in-law is great until you make a mistake. Then the pressure is twice as intense." We talked for almost 2 hours, the longest civil conversation we had shared since childhood. Jackson spoke about his fears of further failure, of losing the identity he had built around being exceptional. I shared stories of my multiple failed prototypes before ShieldTech, the rejections from 57 investors before Amanda took a chance on me. "How did you handle it?" he asked. "The uncertainty, the possibility of total failure. I separated my self-worth from external validation," I said. "Not completely. I am not sure anyone can do that entirely, but enough to keep going when everyone thought I was wasting my time." As we prepared to leave, Jackson hesitated. "I am sorry about the Investigator," he said. "It was controlling and disrespectful. I could not understand how you were suddenly doing well without following the path I thought was the only way to success." It was not a perfect apology, but it was perhaps the most honest thing he had ever said to me. "We could try being brothers again," I offered. "Real ones this time. No competition, no judgment. Just two people who happen to grow up in the same house, trying to figure out life in different ways." He extended his hand, and I shook it. A small step, but significant. Over the following year, we began rebuilding our relationship in small increments. Monthly coffee meetings became regular dinners. I met his children, twin boys who reminded me of us, except their parents were encouraging both the structured overachiever and the creative dreamer equally. I used a portion of my wealth to establish a scholarship for unconventional thinkers, ACE, students whose talents might not translate to traditional academic metrics, but who showed exceptional creativity and problem-solving abilities. The first recipient reminded me so much of myself at 18 that I became her mentor, determined to give her the support I had lacked. Jackson and I will never be best friends. Too much history lies between us, too many years of established patterns. But we have found a fragile peace, a mutual respect that seemed impossible before. Looking back now, I realize that much of my drive came from the need to prove my worth to a family who could not see it. The irony is that once I achieved that validation, I no longer needed it. Success did not heal those childhood wounds. Only self-acceptance and boundaries could do that. True success, I have learned, is not measured in valuations or acquisitions. It comes from following your authentic path, even when that path looks like a dead end to everyone else. It comes from defining achievement on your own terms, not through others' expectations. The relationship between Jackson and I continues to evolve. Sometimes we slide back into old patterns, his need to control my defensive withdrawal. But now we recognize these moments and try to correct course. Progress is not linear, especially when it comes to family dynamics decades in the making. What would you do if someone hired a private investigator to expose your failures but accidentally uncovered your success instead? Would you cut them off completely or try to rebuild the relationship? Let me know in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that success does not always follow the expected path. Thank you for listening, and remember that the people who underestimate you today might be the ones most surprised tomorrow.